AITA for walking out of my daughter's wedding after she disowned me in her speech? I was 34 when I held her in my arms for the first time, small, trembling, with big eyes like question marks looking up at me, waiting to see who I was going to be in her life. I promised her at that exact moment right there in the corner of the courthouse lobby in Charlotte with a social worker watching us like a phony that I would never leave, that I would never make her feel abandoned, that I would never treat her as a second-rate option. But in the end, I was the one tossed aside like a temporary stopgap. My wife Rebecca was always a mystery, warm when she wanted to be, distant when she did not. When we started dating, what attracted me to her was her resilience. She had this quiet strength, this aura of someone who had been through hardship and made peace with it. She told me early on that she did not think she could have children. There was a tremor in her voice when she said it, as if admitting it out loud made it more real. I remember sitting across from her in a little diner in downtown Charlotte, holding her hand over a cold cup of coffee and telling her, "Then, we will adopt. Love does not need biology." She cried that night, soft, silent tears rolling down her cheeks as she snuggled against my chest. And that is what we did. A year later, we brought Grace home. Raising Grace was the hardest and most beautiful thing I have ever done in my life. I threw myself into fatherhood as if it were the only thing that mattered. I was the one getting up at 2 in the morning for those night terrors, who sat through every excruciatingly out-of-tune violin recital, who learned to braid her hair for her first prom, who drove 5 hours round trip to pick her up from a summer camp she decided midweek that she hated. I was there, present, attentive. I read all the books on adoption trauma, on raising a child in an identity crisis, on how to validate someone who does not know where they come from. I was never perfect, but I was always there. But over the years, something changed. It was not loud or immediate. It was slow like erosion, comments here and there. "You do not understand because you are not really my dad." Or when she started calling Rebecca her only real mother during arguments. At first, I thought it was teenage rebellion, the struggle to define oneself in a world that sticks labels on you without asking your opinion. But then came the social media posts, Father's Day wishes without mentioning me, only vague phrases about waiting to meet the man who created her. She started digging into her past, asking questions, looking for people, and Rebecca did not stop her. On the contrary, she encouraged it. They would have whispered conversations, and both would fall silent when I entered the room. There was always a secret between them that I was not supposed to know about. Despite everything, I stayed present. I paid for her first car. I helped her get into college. I supported her through her first breakup when the boy she thought was the one cheated on her. I helped her move into her first apartment. I paid for the wedding venue when her groom-to-be's family could not contribute. I smiled despite the cracks in our relationship, convinced that all this was temporary, that she was just confused, lost, looking for something that had nothing to do with me. I thought the wedding would be a reset, an opportunity to show her how proud I was of her. I even prepared a speech. Nothing extravagant, just something true. A thank you for letting me be a part of her life. A reminder of how much I loved her. The night before the wedding, I sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey, watching the rehearsal dinner guests leave. Rebecca stood next to me, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the street. She had not touched me in weeks, had not had a real conversation with me in months. I asked her if she was nervous about the next day, and she just shrugged. "It is her day," she said. "It has nothing to do with us." There was something cold in her tone, as if I were just another guest attending out of obligation. I laughed awkwardly and said, "Well, I hope she knows how much this means to me." Rebecca looked at me sideways and muttered, "She knows who her real family is." Then she went inside. I stayed up late rereading my speech until the words lost all meaning. I was not afraid of public speaking. I was afraid of being insignificant, of standing up there, saying words that meant the world to me, only to receive blank stares, or worse, polite applause that hid indifference. But I pushed those thoughts away. I told myself I was exaggerating, that tomorrow would be wonderful, that maybe, just maybe, she would look me in the eyes and say thank you, just once. The wedding day was perfect, at least on the surface. White roses lined the aisle. A gentle breeze carried the scent of chrysanthemums across the open field. Guests laughed, hugged, and drank champagne under a golden November sky. Grace was radiant in her dress, and I admit it. When I saw her walk down the aisle, I was moved, not by the ceremony, but because I remembered the little girl who would crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and say, "I am glad I am yours." I clung to that version of her, even when her adult version had stopped clinging to me. When the reception started and the microphone was passed from hand to hand for speeches, I waited, fingers gripping the edge of the chair, my heart pounding. Then she stood up, smiling widely, holding her husband's hand, her voice clear and strong. "I want to thank everyone here today. It means the world to me to have you here to witness the best day of my life." I smiled, leaning forward. This was the moment. Then she said it. "I want to specifically thank my real father, who I had the pleasure of meeting 5 days ago." Laughter erupted. My jaw clenched, my ears rang. "And as for the man who raised me," she continued, looking at me with a cold smile, "I have nothing to say to you. I am just glad you will never know what it feels like to be a real father." There was a pause, then more laughter, mockery from the guests. Even Rebecca was laughing behind her glass of wine, and at that moment, I knew that none of them saw me as anything other than a substitute, a convenience, a wallet, an idiot. I stood up slowly, without a word, without making a scene. I simply turned around and walked out while the music continued to play behind me, and my heart broke in my chest. The air outside was colder than it should have been. I only realized it when I saw my own breath in front of me as I walked toward the car, the keys trembling in my hand, not from the cold, but from a sharp wave of something I could not yet name. Anger, yes. Humiliation, absolutely. But beneath all that, there was something more hollow, disbelief. The kind of disbelief that does not come from a single insult or a bad moment, but from the slow realization that your whole life has silently collapsed behind you while you were smiling in the dust. I sat in the car for 10 full minutes. Engine off, just staring straight ahead while her voice echoed in my head like a bell impossible to silence. "I am glad you will never know what it feels like to be a real father." Those words did not just hurt me, they buried me. Every diaper I changed, every school form I signed, every night I spent awake by her side while she cried over nothing and everything, apparently was worth less than a man she had met 5 days earlier. I did not cry. That surprised me. Not because I thought I was too strong to cry, but because I expected the tears to fall, whether I wanted them to or not. But there was no breakdown, no overflow of emotion, just a cold clarity that settled into my bones like frost. I had been tolerated, not valued, used, not loved, and there, sitting in that rented tuxedo, with a gift bag still on the passenger seat, I realized that I had spent almost 20 years trying to earn a place in a family that had never truly seen me as part of it. I had confused proximity with belonging, and now, with a single cruel speech, they had made it clear. I was never meant to be permanent. I was the scaffolding while they built their own temporary, invisible, disposable structure. Once my function was over, I drove home in silence. That kind of silence that wraps around you like a wet blanket, suffocating, heavy, impossible to shake. I did not turn on the radio. I did not answer the calls that started coming in on the way. Most were from relatives who wanted to know why I had left, if I was okay, or in one case, to tell me I was being dramatic. I let all the calls go to voicemail. I could not bear the thought of explaining myself to people who had laughed while I was being publicly dismissed in front of everyone, because that is what it had felt like. When I pulled into the driveway, the house seemed unrecognizable, too big, too quiet. It felt less like a home and more like a museum of my own naivety. I walked in, took off my shoes out of muscle memory, and sat on the living room couch, hands still clasped in my lap. Rebecca was not home yet. She was probably still at the reception dancing and drinking with people who thought what Grace had said was just a joke or wedding jitters. I knew those kinds of people knew very well how to twist a knife and then call it a toast. I sat there in the dim light, the hours passing as the weight of everything finally began to settle. I was not just angry, I was done. It is strange how a single moment can flip the switch inside you, the one that turns heartbreak into resolve. For me, it happened around 2:14 in the morning when I got up from the couch. I went into the bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept the emergency cash and my old notebook with passwords and documents. I was not running away, I was recalibrating. I wrote a message to Grace right then, unedited, no soft language, just the truth, clean and final. You humiliated me yesterday, and it will be the last time. You have 3 days to move out of my house with your husband. Also return the car I bought for you. Your real father can take care of all that for you. I wish you the best." I did not wait for a reply. I did not need one. Then I turned to Rebecca. If Grace's betrayal had been a punch, Rebecca's was the knife in the back. She knew Grace had reconnected with her biological father. She had encouraged it, hidden conversations from me, allowed this moment to happen, and laughed. But it went deeper than that. I had always suspected there were layers to Rebecca's past she never let me touch. Mentions of a friend from her 20s, random calls from blocked numbers she waved off. The vague answers when I once asked if she wanted to reconnect with her own family. I had believed in her, but love, it turns out, is a very opaque pair of glasses. That night, I took them off. I opened the folder I had on my desk, the one I had been silently adding things to for years. Screenshots, voicemails, photos I was not supposed to find. A girl about 10 years older than Grace who undeniably looked like Rebecca. The same jawline, the same tired eyes, and a birth certificate with Rebecca listed as the mother. She had had a daughter before she met me, a secret daughter, one she had never mentioned to me, never introduced me to, never even acknowledged when I joked once that she looked like someone else. And that night, I decided to stop pretending I did not know. I gathered the evidence. Video clips, recorded voicemails, the scan of the birth certificate, and I sent them to her phone with a single sentence underneath. "You are leaving right now, and you have no excuses. Pack your bags and get out." Then I turned off my phone and went to sleep. I did not wait to see if she replied. I did not need an argument. I needed distance. When I woke up, she was gone. No notes, no apologies, no explanation, just silence. And that same emoji she used to send me when she found something funny, a little smug smirk, was the most honest answer she had given me in years. And the best part is that it did not even surprise me. The morning after they left, I did not get up right away. I did not feel the usual urgency greeting me. No mental to-do lists, no breakfast rituals, no checking to see if Rebecca had left her half-full coffee cup on the counter again. The silence was strange, but not unbearable. It was almost comforting, like the calm after a hurricane has washed everything away. The emotional debris was still there, but so was the relief, because there was nothing left to pretend. No more walking on eggshells around cold shoulders, nor doubting my place in a family that had silently evicted me for years. They were gone, and I no longer had to play the part, the husband, the father, the punching bag. That part of the show was over. By noon, I had inspected every room in the house and carefully looked at what they had left behind. Grace's closet still had some old dresses she would probably never wear again. Half-used makeup kits in the bathroom. Her bridal veil, oddly enough, was draped over the arm of the couch, as if she had hastily tossed it there. Rebecca's side of the bed was almost empty. She had not taken the picture frame from her nightstand. Our wedding photo with a crack in the corner from when it had fallen once. I looked at it for a moment before turning it face down on the furniture. It was not anger I felt. Not exactly. It was a cold freedom, the kind that comes when you realize the people you fear losing let go of you a long time ago. You only catch up to the truth they were already comfortable with. Later that day, I turned on my phone. I had not checked it since I sent those messages the night before. There were 3 missed calls from Grace, one from a number I did not recognize, and a single message from Rebecca. Just a little smirk, nothing more. No explanation, no apologies, just a sneer sent in pixels. As if she were proud of everything. As if she were mocking me from the car that took her out of my life. I deleted it without replying. Grace had left a voicemail that I did not bother listening to until hours later. When I finally did, I was sitting on the kitchen floor, the phone to my ear, expecting something sincere. But it was not. It was her defensive and sharp voice, trying to rewrite history. "I did not want to hurt you," she said. "You know, I was nervous and things came out wrong. You should have stayed. You ruined the end of my wedding." That was the moment something inside me completely hardened. Not because of what she said, but because of what she did not say. There was no remorse, no accountability, not a shadow of understanding the depth of the wound she had inflicted on me. Just blame. I had ruined her day. It did not matter that she had tried to erase almost 20 years of my love in 30 seconds in front of an audience laughing behind her. It did not matter that she had used the word real like a knife to discredit the only father she had ever truly had. I deleted the message and then I blocked her number. In the days that followed, I started taking back my space. It was not about revenge, it was about cleaning house. I took down the photos in the hallway, those posed pictures we sent on Christmas cards. I packed away the travel souvenirs where I had paid for everything while she rolled her eyes behind my back. I opened a drawer and found birthday cards with Dad scribbled in Grace's handwriting, all worn on the edges as if they had been handled too often. I stood there holding them, feeling every version of myself that had believed those words were true. Then I burned them in the fireplace one by one. Watching the edges curl and disappear into smoke felt like a ritual, like a goodbye. Not just to her, but to the illusion I had clung to for too long. A friend dropped by on the third day. His name is Justin. We have known each other since college, even though life had taken us down different paths. He brought grilled burgers and a six-pack of beer, just like we used to do back when life was simpler and heartbreak came in the form of a test grade or a bad date at a bar. He did not say much at first, just sat on the porch with me, handing me a beer without asking questions. When he finally spoke, his words hit me harder than I expected. She always seemed distant to me, he said carefully, talking about Rebecca, like she was playing a role, not living it. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I mistook silence for peace. Justin looked at me for a long time, then asked the question I had not had the courage to say out loud. Why did you stay so long, brother? You had to know something was wrong. I did not answer right away because the truth was shameful, not in a way that made me feel weak, but in a way that made me feel too human. I stayed because I thought loving harder would eventually make them love me back. I stayed because I did not want to believe that you could give people everything and still not be enough. I stayed because leaving felt like failure. But now I realized that staying had been the real failure. Staying had been a slow death. I turned to Justin and told him, I thought if I kept showing up, eventually they would see me. He just nodded and took a sip. Well, now they see you, and you are better off. That night, for the first time in over a decade, I slept with the bedroom door completely open and the fan on without anyone complaining. I sprawled across the whole bed. I did not dream of Grace or Rebecca. I did not wake up reaching for the warmth of a body that had grown cold beside me a long time ago. I just slept deeply, fully, as if my soul had finally closed its eyes after years of being kept awake by guilt and confusion. The next morning, I made pancakes for one, without Rebecca's passive-aggressive comments about carbs, without Grace's fake smile before she disappeared into her room. Just me, my plate, and the sound of nothing but the birds outside. And you know what? It felt like a beginning, not a happy one, not yet, but a clean one, and that was enough for now. There is a strange kind of silence that settles into a house after people leave. It is not the usual quiet, but the eerie echo of absence. Every room seemed louder than before, even though no one was speaking. The kitchen still faintly smelled of Rebecca's perfume, that synthetic floral scent she oversprayed when she left every morning. Her coffee cup was still on the counter, the rim stained with old lipstick, as if she had just stepped out and might return at any moment with her typical tired sigh, saying, "We need more oat milk." But she was not coming back, not now. Never. Grace's room, with its soft purple walls and the fairy lights that had stopped working years ago, felt like a museum exhibit dedicated to the little girl I once knew. Not to the woman who had publicly dismissed me, but to the little one who asked me if I thought the moon followed us when we drove at night. The layers of betrayal were not just emotional, they were woven into every corner of that house. And for days, I wandered through it like a ghost, touching the edges of a life that had only been half mine. The first knock on the door came 2 days later. I had just finished emptying a box of old photo albums when I heard it. Loud, persistent, with that specific rhythm that tells you the visitor has no intention of leaving anytime soon. I opened the door and found Melissa, Rebecca's older sister, standing on the porch, arms crossed, and a look that could cut concrete. "What the hell is going on?" Melissa blurted out before even saying hello. "Rebecca is staying with a woman nobody knew existed. Grace is at her husband's parents' house, and I have half the family calling me to figure out this circus." Care to explain? I should have slammed the door in her face. It would have been easy, but a part of me, foolish or noble, I do not know, felt that if I explained it clearly enough, someone might finally understand why I could not pretend anymore. So, I invited her in. I told her everything. From the moment Rebecca told me she could not have kids to the adoption, the late-night talks with Grace, and the cracks that started to show. I told her about the secret daughter, the lies, the coldness, the laughter at the wedding. I saw Melissa's expression shift from anger to confusion, then to something resembling disbelief. She sat on the edge of the armrest as if her body did not know how to process what it was hearing. "Wait," she interrupted, holding up a hand. "You were saying she had another daughter and never told you." I nodded. 10 years older than Grace. I found the papers, the photos, the messages. Melissa blinked hard, her jaw clenching. "Jesus Christ," she muttered. "I always knew Rebecca could be distant, but this." She looked around the living room as if seeing it for the first time, trying to spot the ghosts I had lived with for years. She did not apologize, not exactly. But before leaving, she put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You did not deserve this, none of it." And it was the closest thing to validation I had received from anyone in that family in over a decade. The next day, the rumors started. Apparently, Grace had posted something cryptic on social media. A photo of her wrinkled wedding dress in the corner of a guest room and a caption that read, "Be careful who you trust to raise you." The comments section was a disaster. Some applauded her bravery, others asked what happened. A few people, mostly mutual friends, messaged me privately asking for my side of the story. At first, I did not answer. I did not feel the need to explain myself to people who had laughed while I was being dismissed in front of everyone. But then came an unexpected message. Erin, Grace's childhood best friend, the girl who had practically lived at our house during high school. "Mr. Caldwell," she wrote, "I do not know what happened, but I want you to know you were the best dad I saw growing up. I hope you are okay." That message hit me hard because Erin had seen it all. The bedtime stories, the dance rehearsals, the road trips, the quiet way I always carried Grace's backpack when she was tired without anyone asking me to. If she remembered, maybe others did too. Maybe the truth was not entirely lost. Still, the damage was real. That weekend, I went to the hardware store and bought new locks. Not out of fear, but because I wanted the house to reflect the change that had finally happened inside me. No more waiting for people to come back. No more waiting for apologies. I packed up, put everything in boxes, and left them at her husband's parents' house. Without a note, without an explanation, just her life, returned with the same indifference she had shown me. The car was returned 2 days past the deadline. Tank almost empty, a new dent on the bumper, and not a thank you or a goodbye. Just the keys on the hood and a text that read, "There it is." That is when I knew she was gone forever, not just from the house, but from my heart. You do not come back from that kind of cruelty. People talk, they always do. And sure enough, the whispers started at the grocery store, in the church parking lot. One woman even stopped me in the produce aisle and asked, "Is it true you threw your own daughter out?" I looked at her for a long time before answering. "No, I just stopped allowing strangers to live in my house." She opened her mouth as if she wanted to argue, but she did not because she knew, or maybe she did not, but it did not matter anymore. I was no longer in the business of defending myself to people who only show up to see the disaster, to talk, to speculate. I knew the truth, and that was enough. Sometimes, the loneliness crept in. I will not pretend it did not. At night, when the wind hit the windows and the old pipes groaned, I would catch myself turning to say something to Rebecca, thinking about that show we would have watched with Grace if things had been different. But those moments passed. I let them come, let them hurt, and then let them go, because holding on to ghosts never makes them leave any faster. It just makes you forget you are still alive. One afternoon, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon and watched the sky fade from gold to purple. The kind of sunset that demands your attention as if it were a show just for you. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange gratitude. Not for what I had lost, but for what I had finally let go of. The performance, the pretending, the need to be enough for people who had already decided who I was. I was no longer angry, I was just tired, done. And in that silence, in that empty house, I heard something I had not heard in years. My own peace settling in like a lost friend. It was a Tuesday afternoon when she reappeared, unannounced, uninvited, standing on my porch as if she had the right to be there. I saw her first through the window, her silhouette behind the screen door, arms crossed as if she were trying not to fall apart. Her car, a different one, probably borrowed, was running in the driveway. the engine idling as if it were ready to whisk her away if things went wrong. I did not answer right away. I watched her for a full minute, rocking on her heels, biting her lower lip, just like when she was little and got caught lying about something small. Except this was not small, and I did not know if I should open the door or leave it shut as a final symbolic gesture. She did not knock. Maybe she knew she had not earned it. But I opened the door anyway. Not because I forgave her, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see it. I needed to know if she was capable of regret or if she had only come to finish off what was left of me. Her eyes looked tired, sunken. She was not wearing makeup, which surprised me. She had always cared about her image. She always needed to appear perfectly put together, even when she was falling apart. She seemed smaller than I remembered, as if the weight of her actions had permanently settled on her shoulders. None of it softened me. "Dad," she said softly, her voice breaking on a word she had once thrown in the trash. "Can we talk?" I did not invite her in. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. We stood there on the porch, separated by a few steps with an abyss of silence between us. She looked at the porch swing as if she wanted to sit on it. As if maybe it would remind me of when she used to curl up on my lap there when she was little and fall asleep to the sound of cicadas. But she did not sit down. She must have known those memories did not belong to her anymore. Not after what she did. I did not know what I was saying at the wedding, she began in a shaky voice. It went wrong. I did not mean to say it. I was nervous and emotional. I did not want it to sound like that. You said, I replied slowly, calmly, that you were glad I would never know what it feels like to be a real father. She flinched as if hearing it out loud hurt more. I know, she whispered. I was wrong. 5 days, I said. You knew him for 5 days and you threw 18 years of me in the trash. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I thought. She started and stopped. I thought knowing him would answer something in me. I thought it would make me whole. But he is not who I thought he was. He disappeared after the wedding. I have not heard from him since. He did not even answer when I called to tell him I was pregnant. The word hit me harder than I expected. Not because I was surprised, but because I realized she had planned to share it with him, not me. I had held her hand through flus, heartbreaks, and panic attacks. And yet, she had chosen a stranger for this moment. And now, here she was, looking for a place to fall. I am not him, I said. And I am not your safety net either. I did not come for money, she said quickly. I came because I made a mistake, and because you are still my dad. No, I replied, my voice already firm. I was your dad. You made it very clear that I am not anymore. Then, she started to cry. Not loud sobs, but that silent, desperate weeping. She wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweatshirt and shook her head as if she could not believe I was staying so firm. Maybe she thought the porch would soften me. Maybe she believed tears would erase what had been said, what had been laughed at, what had been broken in public. But it was too late. There are words you cannot take back. There are lines that, once crossed, completely redraw the map of who someone is to you. Please, she said in a broken voice. I am sorry. I looked up at the sky, toward the oak tree in the yard that stood firm through every season without losing its essence. That tree had survived everything. Storms, droughts, winters. I admired its quiet strength. I wanted to be that tree. You cannot humiliate me and then ask me to forget just because your backup plan failed, I said, finally meeting her eyes again. You made your choice, you erased me, and you made sure the world saw it. That is not something I can ignore. She nodded slowly, her lips pressed together and her jaw trembling. I did not think you would really cut me out of my life. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the irony. She thought I would keep taking it, like always. She took a step back as if the weight of the conversation was pushing her. I do not know what to do now, she said. That is no longer my problem. She opened her mouth one more time, but no words came out. Just silence, just nothing. She walked down the porch steps slower than she had arrived. I did not watch her get into the car. I did not watch her drive away. I went back into the house and shut the door. The echo of the deadbolt sounded like closure. True, earned finality. That night, I did not feel triumphant, not powerful. I felt empty, but in a clean way, as if I had finally carved out the rot that had been eating at me for years. I made dinner, just a grilled cheese sandwich and soup, and sat on the couch with a blanket over my shoulders like it was armor. I thought about the child she was expecting. A child who would one day hear about me, maybe in fragments, maybe distorted by her bitterness or shame. Maybe that child would wonder someday who I was, why I was not there. And maybe they would never know how much I had loved their mother before she tossed me aside like a broken tool. And that was okay. There are stories that do not need to be told. There are truths too quiet to be shouted. I slept deeply that night, without dreams, without ghosts. Just the calm of a man who had finally stopped bleeding for people who never learned to clean up their own mess. The thing about peace is that it does not announce itself. It does not arrive with a parade or a big sign saying, "You made it." It arrives silently, usually after the war is over, and settles into the empty spaces that once held your pain. For me, it arrived 2 weeks after Grace left the porch with her apology and her unborn child, loaded like a secret between us. It arrived when I stopped in the middle of my living room with the morning sun filtering through the blinds and realized I did not feel heavy anymore. The bitterness, the confusion, the pain. They were still there, of course, like old bruises you forget about until someone presses on them. But they no longer ran my life, no longer dictated my breathing or my late-night thoughts. I had walked through the fire and come out burned, but whole. And for the first time in years, I was simply living. Not for anyone else, not to prove anything, just living. I started doing little things for myself again, things I had abandoned bit by bit without realizing it. I got out my old journals, the things I wrote before every day became a checklist of other people's needs. I turned pages filled with stories, ideas, moments of clarity from a younger man who still believed he could make a place for himself in the world without being devoured by it. I started writing again. No long, polished essays or dramatic accounts of what had happened, but little reflections. A sentence here, a paragraph there, truths I did not yet have the courage to say out loud, but needed to see on paper. Writing had always been my way of making sense of the chaos. And now, writing it, I realized I was no longer doing it to figure them out. I was doing it to figure myself out. In the neighborhood, the whispers had died down, though I still caught a few looks from those who thought I should have handled things differently. Some thought I had been cruel, others that I should have kept the peace for the sake of the family. But none of them had been in my house that night after the wedding. None of them had sat alone in a car while the laughter continued inside. None of them had heard their daughter disown them with a smile, while their wife laughed, as if it were the punchline to a joke nobody had warned you about. People form opinions quickly about pain they have never had to feel. So, I stopped caring what they thought. Not out of spite, but out of survival. A month later, I took a trip to the coast. Just me, no itinerary, no company, just my car, a few bags, and the road stretching out in front of me like an invitation. I stayed in a cabin by the sea, a little place with creaky floorboards and a view that made you forget all the bad stuff. I spent the mornings walking along the shore, letting the wind and the salt settle on my skin. I breathed differently there, deeper, slower, as if I were no longer bracing for disappointment. One morning, I stood by the water's edge, shoes in hand, letting the waves wash over my feet. The cold water jolted me, but I did not move. I just looked at the horizon and muttered, speaking to no one in particular. I was a real dad. Saying it out loud felt necessary, not for validation, but for closure. It was true, and that truth deserved to exist, even if no one else carried it with me. I heard from Melissa while I was gone. She left a voicemail this time, her voice softer, less urgent. "I am not calling to try and change your mind," she said. "I just wanted to say I hope you find some peace. You deserve better." I did not call her back, but I appreciated it. Not because I needed someone to take my side, but because it reminded me that someone saw what I had given, that someone outside of my pain understood that I was not the one who had walked away for no reason. I had been pushed, then pushed harder, and finally broken before I chose to save what little was left of me. There is dignity in that. There is grace in saying stop. As for Grace, she did not try to contact me again. Not after that day. I heard through acquaintances that she and her husband were expecting a girl, that they were still living at his parents' house, that her real father had never called back, never asked, never showed the slightest interest in how she was doing. It did not surprise me. There are people who are ghosts long before they disappear. Still, hearing it, I felt something complicated. Not joy, not vindication, just a quiet sadness for the little girl she had been and the one she was soon going to raise. Cycles do not break on their own, and even though I had stopped bleeding for her, I still hoped she would find a way to heal before passing the wound on to someone else. Rebecca was living with her oldest daughter, the one I was never supposed to know about. She was rebuilding something, I guess, or pretending to. I wished them the best in the same way you wish well to strangers who once mattered. I no longer felt anything for her, not even anger. She had made her choices, built her life on omissions and half-truths, and now she would carry that. I did not have to carry it for her anymore. One night, back home, I invited Justin over for dinner. We grilled steaks, had a few beers, and sat on the porch just like we used to before life got so damn complicated. "You look different," he said, half laughing. "Lighter." I nodded. "It has that effect." He raised his bottle and clinked it against mine. "To fresh starts," he said, and I smiled because that was exactly it. Not a rebirth, not a reinvention, but a quiet beginning. Solid. Before going to bed that night, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself the way I used to when Grace was little, to check if I looked like the kind of man worthy of being called a father. I no longer saw failure, no longer saw someone rejected. I saw a man who had loved deeply, who had stayed when it was hard, who had given without keeping score, who had finally chosen himself. And that, I realized, was the realest thing about me. Sometimes, walking away is not the hard part. The hard part is accepting that the people you love the most never truly saw you. Comment. Hey everyone, I wanted to share a few thoughts after this story because it really hit home for me. Sometimes, the hardest thing we do is protect our own peace after giving so much of ourselves. I believe setting clear boundaries is one of the kindest things we can do, not just for others, but especially for ourselves. It is okay to step back when respect is no longer there and choose healing over staying stuck. Taking responsibility for our own happiness means learning when to walk away with grace. You deserve relationships where you are truly seen and valued every single day. If this resonates with you, take a moment today to check in with your heart and ask yourself what you truly need. Remember that real growth often begins the moment we stop pouring into places that leave us empty. Choosing peace is not giving up, it is finally choosing yourself. I would love to hear what this made you reflect on. Drop your thoughts below. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.